Hello everybody, my name is Ann Théato and welcome to episode 77 of the Psychic Matters podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the show so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. And if you could leave me a written review, that would be amazing, as it really helps the podcast to move up the podcast charts. And you can do that by going to my website, anntheato.com, and clicking on the podcast tab. And guess what? We reached the number 2 slot in Singapore's spirituality charts this week. So I am thrilled to bits. Thank you to everyone who listens over in Singapore. And I can see that my listeners in the United Arab Emirates have been busy tuning into Psychic Matters, and you guys have helped get this podcast up to number 10 in the United Arab Emirates spirituality charts. So huge thanks to you too. I'm amazed to be in the top 10 of these 2 beautiful countries. It's just wonderful to know that our communal work as light workers, mediums, psychics, healers, and workers in the paranormal space is finally reaching the ears of many all around the world, helping us to understand the power of our subconscious mind. In my personal life, I'm hobbling around now. I can walk a good couple of miles on flat ground, so that's truly wonderful. And I'm no longer trapped in the house. Hooray! And I can get out and about into the breeze and feel the fresh air all around me, so that's a really fantastic feeling. Thanks to everyone who has been attending the Mediumship Hour each week. We've had some wonderful Tuesday evenings with some amazing evidence from the spirit world. For those of you who don't know yet, I demonstrate mediumship for free every single Tuesday throughout the year online, alongside 2 of my incredibly good friends and brilliant mediums, Leslie Malone and Tyrone Cusack. So if you want to come along and see what the Mediumship Hour is all about, you would be very welcome indeed. It is held every Tuesday at 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock UK time zone. We do close the doors about 5 past the hour, so you won't get in if you're late, I'm afraid, because the mediums will have begun to work. So do join us early, and details on how to join are on my website under events. And if you want to, you could sign up for my mailing list while you're there, and that way you can keep up to date with any courses and tuition that I offer, as well as all my events like the Mediumship Hour, etc. I only send 2 emails a month just when there is a new podcast release. So when you do sign up for my mailing list, you'll only hear from me twice a month, which I hope is manageable in the sea of emails that we all receive out there. You'll just hear from me twice a month. This week, I am interviewing a young British medium by the name of Stephen Smith. Stephen wrote to me a while ago saying that he had very much enjoyed listening to Psychic Matters and that he'd learned a lot from listening to many of my guests and all that they had to offer spiritually. And Stephen went on to explain that he had started to develop his mediumship at the age of 16 and that he was currently 22 years old. And I thought, goodness me, why have I not yet interviewed the younger mediums who are working diligently out there on behalf of the spirit world? Our human beings have ages. I'm 57 and he is 22. But you know, our souls, they don't have an age. And I had a fascinating discussion with Stephen, and I think that we are going to be firm friends going forward. I really hope you enjoy this episode. I'm very excited to introduce my guest this week. He is an evidential medium, and he's here to talk about the spirit world and how it impacts us all on a daily basis. Stephen Smith, welcome to Psychic Matters.
Hi, Anne. Thank you for having me today. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad to talk to you today. It's just absolutely brilliant. You've made time out of your very busy schedule to come and share your knowledge with us. And perhaps let's just go back to the very beginning. How did you become a medium and how did it begin to manifest in your life?
Sure. So when I was younger, to put it from the very beginning, I was about 7 or 8 years old. My mum would watch Psychic Sally on the TV, things of that nature. When I was that age, I didn't comprehend much, you just kind of live your young childhood years. But there was something about it when I would sit down with my mum and watch those programs that just spoke to me, or I had some kind of keen interest. I didn't really get what was going on or think too much about it, but I was always watching that kind of program where the medium would connect with the spirit world and bring through evidence and, all of those great things. Time progressed, skipped forward to when I was about 15 years old. I kind of become interested in the world of spirituality, I guess you could call it. So I was exploring law of attraction, mediumship, healing, and those kind of things. I went on to eventually have a connection with a medium, and we crossed paths, and the journey kind of unled from there, really. I'd seen some platform mediums when I was 16 and just kind of started to explore more of the world of mediumship specifically. And from there up until now, so really from when I was 16 till present, things have just unfolded, and gradually, I think we all see on this kind of path, things fall into place. So there's been circles that I've developed that since, or a lot of self-education online, and coming across some very interesting people who I've learned a lot from as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. You say when you were about 15. So perhaps it's an unusual thing for a 15-year-old boy or girl to be interested in mediumship to the extent that you found yourself.
Sure.
Was there a trigger for that, Stephen? Was it that you were seeing spirit people from a young age, or had a psychic awareness or a psychic knowing? How did it come to you?
Sure. That's a very good question, actually. I guess for everyone, it can be quite different, and it's always varied. But I think when I was younger, I wouldn't say particularly I was very online in the sense that I would see or just know things. I mean, I suppose when I look at it, there was experiences that I had during my childhood where I would be in public with my mum or whoever, and I would see in my mind's eye, just like, this person who's across the road from us falling over. And it was just a random thing in my mind. But then, 10 seconds later, they happen to fall over. So we have those little experiences, right? And I think we all do as humans. So there was those little ones when I was younger, but nothing that really spoke to me or alarmed my parents or anyone around. When I was around that age of 15, the main thing that led me into it at that point, I suppose, like looking into the law of attraction and even meditation, mindfulness and that, was I was actually at quite a low point in my life. And I think a lot of it revolved around how I was feeling inside and that kind of struggle that we all have. And I think it just became very intense and rapid, especially at that age where you're trying to find your bearings still. And you just, you're coming to the peak of, say, your secondary school years and so many changes. So I think I didn't quite know how to manage my ways of feeling. And I just constantly had this experience repeated of depression and anxiety and all of the not so pleasant stuff that comes with, right? So that's what kind of led me to that mindfulness stream. And then I think things just randomly kept unfolding. Like I would, along that way of exploring, I would come across things such as mediumship and how the mindfulness and meditation is connected with that. And in other words, it all has a similar underlining tone, whether it's law of attraction, the mediumship, the meditation, spirituality. There's some kind of signature energy that blends them all together.
And were you an only child, Stephen? Did you have brothers and sisters?
No, so I actually have two older brothers. We're all quite different, to be honest, and not particularly close. One of them's 4 years older, the other is 7 years older. Yeah, so when I was younger growing up, all of this kind of mediumship or spirituality, it wasn't even a question in my family dynamics. My older siblings, I'm aware, I think don't particularly know what to make of it or, have their own views on it, so to speak. But I think I've definitely been the odd chicken in the family, so to speak. Yes, it's been a different experience in that sense as well with, I think, the way it can impact us. There was something we was discussing, Anne, on our first meeting with regards to how on these kind of journeys that we're taking on in life that spark interest of spirituality or whatever it may be. Like for most of the listeners who are listening, you find that there's a common theme again with being I say odd chicken of the family, right? And there's something about it as well that speaks the truth in itself, where I think we learn a lot from it, but it also brings up a whole other load of dynamics that we have to kind of work through as a part of the journey.
Yeah, I hear you. I totally hear you. I think a lot of people listening will understand what did you call it? The lone chicken. I love that. I love that. Yeah, I think we all resonate with that one where people look at us slightly weird. But you've carried that forward despite perhaps a family that doesn't, or certainly your brothers that not understanding it the way that you do. What about your mum? Does she support you with your mediumship?
Yeah, do you know what? My mum actually does, and it's lovely. It's a really lovely thing. My dad, well, yeah, I mean, it's not like he's a anti-supporter or tells me I can't do this or that, which is lovely because that in itself, helps the situation, because I know not everyone's fortunate in some sense to have that kind of blessing of just not really any input, let alone being forced that you shouldn't do it. But with regards to my mum's support, I mean, it's definitely there. I wouldn't say she's on the fence about this kind of mediumistic world anymore, because she's had a fair amount of experiences, going to demonstrations and things like that herself. But she knows I'm into it. She knows it's something I've loved since I was 15, 16. She knows I watched it with her when I was younger. And she knows that is my intention to kind of follow through and see where this journey, mediumistic kind of world takes me, In a long story short, I do.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's really nice. And what about your friends? Do you have friends that are very supportive, or are you a lone chicken with your friends? Because personally, for me, I'm kind of a lone chicken. I mean, there's an age gap between the two of us, but my friends are supportive of what I do, but they don't necessarily believe in what I believe.
Sure. I hear what you're saying on that note, definitely. I think I have a varied kind of range there with like support and understanding from friends. I would say for the most part, on the whole, I'm quite blessed in the sense that either there is that understanding there and they get it, or they just support it and they're not too sure whether it's something or not, but they're open. And I think it's with that open mind that things can unfold and we get more insight, whether it's more true to us or not as true, we get to see from the openness. But yeah, I would say I do for the most part. However, I'm aware that with regards to talking histrionic in terms of friendships and people in our path, I notice that there's been a drastic change in one way or another with regards to those who I have around me and those who I resonate with, those who I can support and who support me. Say this time 5 years ago, those who I have around me now is much more, I guess the right way to put it would be in union or sync with where I'm at. I notice that part of those changes come when the people around us, friends or family, don't quite understand it and kind of are not too sure and almost become standoffish. I think it's a part of the journey or part of the path that we notice often, either we or other people along the way in each other's lives drop off because the journey takes us to other areas, I suppose, and sometimes we're in each other's life for a period of time and then we depart to go on to the next chapter.
And would you say that your soul has sort of moved you into the right circles of people for its growth at this time? Because I know that you now attend development circles, courses, you obviously enriching your mind with workshops and all of these things. So perhaps you've now placed yourself in alignment with your soul's purpose, as it were.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a nice question, that one, actually. So I would say the last few years, again, is where there's been a big turning point, especially the last couple of years. I think it's almost been like from, again, when I was around the ages of 15 with that openness, it's almost like so many things have shifted. Life is very different, but as you say, it's almost like my soul's took me to a new space where things are more aligned. I think that kind of brings up the element of like talking about foundations and how like what we have in our life, the people around us, the things we do, perhaps the environments we stay in and keep ourselves busy in, all have a direct link to the connection in the things that we do. So I know a handful of years back how all of those things were in my life are very different to how they are now. And I realised how my soul's took me onto that journey to be where I am now, supports me tenfold in going forward. And I think also just being a bit more grounded in what it is that I'm doing and not feeling so questionable as to whether this is real or how I feel about it. It's just like, I guess if you put it in a mathematical equation, let's just say, metaphorically, 4 years ago, there was a big equation that I was trying to figure out. And so many things had to shift because that foundation just simply didn't support where I was to be as I am now. I kind of figured my way through that equation and continue to as we do for the rest of our lives, right? But yeah, definitely it's far more in alignment now, and I feel that is due to the nature of the course of action, however you want to put it, that my soul, the pathways has took me on.
And so, Stephen, where are you at with your training in mediumship? I know that we had a pre-chat, didn't we? So we had like a pre-interview chat, which was really interesting. And in that, you said to me that you had joined a local circle and that you were having a wonderful time there and learning so much. Maybe say a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So it was around when I was 16 when I first went to my very first circle. And it was interesting because it's so far-fetched, so different to what you'd be used to. And obviously, as the journey's unfolded and I've explored other formats of training and whatnot, you start to see, just as any area of life, the more energy and time you put into it, and the more it unfolds and the more we become fine-tuned to whatever it is we may be doing. I've been fortunate to have a nice amount of teachers along the way at different points, people who have been established in their mediumship or spiritual path for quite some time. Where I'm at now with where I live, I have fortunately got a good circle, a good teacher, a good foundation. And within that community, we do things such as demonstrations on Sundays. So it's like a Sunday service. So each Sunday we'll have a different medium. It's always just different, right? You always get to learn so much from those. But where I'm at with the training now is fortunately to a point where I've been able to get prepared and go through different stages of the journey to be able to get onto platform. I've not gone fully fledged, so to speak, on platform out and about myself as it stands, but I've gone on to do platform work with my teacher. So initially we did a couple of demos or demonstrations at the local service. So it's somewhere where anyone can attend. You can just make a donation if you like, So I was able to do that a couple of times, and it's very testing. It's just like going to play an instrument or sing, I'm sure, in front of an audience. It's very different. But I was fortunate enough to have the experience where I was actually going to watch a mediumship event with my mum. And it was my teacher from my circle who was doing this event, and she was doing it with another medium. He was going to be coming down from a different area, I believe, but he's quite established in the work he does too, as far as I'm aware. So the event started at 7:30. Me and my mum arrived at 7:25. My teacher came to me and said, in this room full of 50 people, is it all right to have a word with you for a minute, Stephen, if you wouldn't mind? So we went to the side and she said, the medium who was going to do the event with me tonight had to cancel because of personal circumstance. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to come on platform and do the event with me. My heart sunk for a slight moment. But when you get that feeling, Anne, that it's just, all right, the time is now, you've just got to do it, And although there's that feeling of pressure and overwhelm, there's also that feeling of, okay, I'm listening. So I listened, trusted my gut, sat down. I was able to have a little longer time to tune in and call for my guides. And then obviously the event began and it was okay. It was very well and it was lovely. Getting to that point of going in front of many eyes and many different people, it just changes the experience, because I think on the level of being a medium, so to speak, when you're on a one-to-one, I think it's initially, at least, it seems very far different to how it is going on platform, because being one-to-one, like in a session with a client, it's quite direct and there's not so many energies or spirits and so many different things to work through. But going on to, say, do the event, you get to start to see quite quick and fast how spirit then work with you in different ways, and how it unfolds in that perspective.
Yeah, that's amazing. Your heart must have been in your mouth that evening, because you were totally thrown in the deep end by the spirit world that night. But you spoke, of course, about trusting. And not only were you demonstrating in front of 50 people, but you were also demonstrating in front of your mother for the first time.
Yeah, that's right, actually. Good point. That completely popped out of my head. So that was also another layer of, I think, part of the test, right? Because I think it can't go without saying that I think for anything and anyone in life, regardless of the matter, but especially in, say, this kind of work, there's constant, tests that we kind of put under, so to speak. And it's not like a bad thing. It's part of the journey, right, for the growth. But yeah, I did initially think that as well. That's what came up when Charlene had asked me, who's my teacher. And I thought, well, my mum's out there and I was going to watch the event with my mum, and I didn't think I was going to demonstrate in front of my mum. And as you say, the heart, it hits you. But it was again that calling and that feeling of the time is right and it's okay. So it actually wasn't so bad. And it was actually a nice experience to have, because it meant moving through another layer of armor, if you want to put it like that, the worries, the fears, what are people going to think, what if I get it wrong? And my mum's sitting there, and I've spoke to my mum how much I love this kind of, mystical work. And she knows I've been into it for years. And oh my goodness, what if? And really at the core of it, it's not at all what this kind of work and spirit world is about anyway. But just as the person and the son of my mum, it was definitely another challenge to work through. But it was perfectly fine. And I think that's what spirit were able to show me that night, because I've been on the fence almost over the last couple of years about kind of just saying to the spirit world, I guess, all right, I'm ready now. I'm listening. I know I've gone back and forth. I know this is part of the journey, but I'm listening, and that's kind of part of what almost put me even further in that direction, to say, I'm open to whatever you guys show me, so long as it's for the light, right? It really changed things, I think, at that point. It was good for my mum also. She learned from it. And I think that gave her insight and perhaps changed her perspective in some sense. And yeah, I think it's just that another part of, like we're discussing now, when you look back on your journey, it's that next chapter kind of thing,
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I mean, having your mother watch you demonstrate must have been, for me, oh gosh, I'd be absolutely petrified. But to have that happen, it saves a lot of explanation of the work, doesn't it? She can see
exactly
firsthand how you work, how the benefit of everything that you're giving to the people that have come there to listen for messages from their loved ones. I mean, it's so beautiful. It saves months and months of explanation in just one evening.
Yeah, do you know what? It's spot on, exactly as you said, because all this time, I mean, within my family, let's say, my actual family dynamics, close family and extended, my mum would be the one person who I've spoke probably most about this kind of world, right, of mediumship. And she's also spoke a lot about it with me. We have a lot of dialogue. It's one of those things where you can chat and you can chat and you can chat and you can talk about this, what happened, and this experience. And, it works both ways. But 100% on that level of explanation, it changed it, because for a fair period of time now, talking number of years, because I've gone into this like independently, saying mum's not been with me when I've gone circles and that, of course, I would share and give feedback of my experience. But it's almost like that thing where it always feels you're one step ahead, and you're trying to give insight on the truth of it and how amazing it is, but you can only explain it in words. And really, I think it's about the experience, being in the environment, seeing things, witnessing. In terms of like demonstrations, I don't really have to see spirits to have the validation, but it changed it. And that explanation went from having to say so much to actually just being able to sit there in the same space and have a mutual understanding,
Yeah, that is so beautiful, so lovely. And what strikes me about you, Stephen, is the calling within you seems so strong, the calling to this work. And it kind of reminds me of when I was young, really young, like 10, I suppose. I come from a very strict Catholic family, and my mum and her sister, my auntie, they were absolutely desperate for one of my brothers to get the calling to the priesthood. And they were always saying about the calling. He was called to the priesthood. She was called to be a nun. And I used to lie in bed at night thinking, oh my goodness, please don't let me get the calling. I don't want the calling. I can't go and be a nun. I can't do it. I don't want to go and live in a nunnery. And it used to keep me awake because I had a dialogue going very clearly with my God at that time, a conversation that went back and forth. And I used to beg not to get the calling. And it's funny, isn't it? Because actually, the calling isn't something frightening and scary and to be feared. It's so beautiful when you fall into it. You're like, I'm really called to go in this direction, called by my soul, by my essence to go and do this work.
Yeah, 100%. That's a really beautiful way to put it, and it speaks so many truths. And I think that's for everyone. No matter what kind of genre of path is not the right way to put it, but talking in the sense of unique experiences that we have and paths we take, whether it's for a particular religion or faith or, own belief system, there is this natural thing that we usually will come across that we feel naturally called to. And I think that's true in what you say, that it does end up becoming this thing that when we listen to that calling and we trust and we are open to exploring it, that we start to feel that alignment in that sense. It feels right. We see that we become rejuvenated. We feel understood a little bit more, or at least we begin to have a bit more understanding and insight about our own selves and what fits right for us. It's different for everyone. And it also gives me the insight and understanding, however it's to come across in one's life, whether it's Christianity or Buddhism or a particular spiritual path, for each of those individuals who then feel led towards that, it really is evident that when one is called towards such a path and they take it, it does transform their life in one way or another. And I think, like we know ourselves, we can look back and talk about all these synchronicities and how we were led into another direction in life.
People, Stephen, often speak of the clairs. Clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairolfactory, all of these different things. Perhaps you could let us know what your understanding is of the clairs and how, and maybe the ways in which spirit can communicate with us using those.
Sure. There's a nice thing to talk about, actually. So I think, in a long story short, the way the clairs would come into this conversation is almost about the way spirit world would talk to us. And you don't have to be a medium for the clairs to be a part of your daily living experience, right? But it's the way they would talk to us in a way that we would be able to interpret and understand as a form of communication. Because it's not always the case that you'll hear very clearly, like we're talking to each other now, the spirit world come to you and say particular sentences. They'll talk to us through the means that they can. So whether it's clairvoyance, which is where we might see within the mind's eye, it could be like a TV screen or images that we see, Just as if we thought about something that happened last week at the grocery store, we can see that clip in our mind. With a clairaudience, we might hear internally through our mind. It might be our voice, it might be a voice that's unfamiliar, or it might be externally. There are a varied amount of clairs like you discussed, and whether it's sensing, hearing, knowing, you just have this knowing, you can't explain it, you just know, feeling, there's a variety, and I feel like there's probably even more than we've actually established in terms of what we've got down on paper or how we've kind of summarized these things, like in where we are at, on a level of consciousness right now. The way I find spirits will often come through more strongly in the way I work as a medium is within the realms of clairvoyance and the clairaudience in terms of the internal hearing of the mind. So it's not always as straight cut forward. If they're working with us, say, clairvoyantly, just for insight for those who are listening, if in a session with a client, let's say, we sit down, and the way I could describe it is I might feel male to my left, female to my right, so to speak, and I feel a spirit step forward, and they'll begin to describe how the spirit is presenting themselves to me. So they may go about showing me, what they looked like, how they was towards the end of their passing, how that felt, and many other things. All the clairs work during that period of communication because it's a way to get to the context and bring through the evidence that it's the person who they are wishing to connect with that is coming through. The interesting thing is that learning and development of the interpretation, because just as humans on this planet, we communicate verbally for the most part. But for some of us, we're not able to do that. For some of us, we might not be able to hear with our physical ears. So we have other forms of communication like sign language, right? So for those who don't know sign language, like myself, I haven't learned it, I wouldn't really be able to communicate with someone thoroughly if they could speak with sign language, but it's something that I can learn, right? And so the spirit world, in the sense of the language they'll come across with the clairs, they might be showing, for example, during a demonstration or on a one-to-one, the spirit who's come forward and they've just described and linked in with evidentially, then that spirit may be coming forward and showing a clip, let's just say, for example, of a car. And this car is going 1,000,000 miles an hour. And there's so many things in the road where this car is speeding. And so that's being brought forward to me as a medium. I think as you start to develop with these clairs, which we're talking about, it can be very difficult. And it's different for each medium, right? Initially, I remember when I first started to develop with the clairs, say, for example, I was presented with such a graphic video clip in my mind of that car, I would give it and I would describe it as I was seeing it. Now, sometimes that's perfect and that's all that's needed. But initially, let's say I would describe it to someone a couple of years ago as, the spirit who stepped forward, who we've just linked with, they're showing me a car. It's going 1,000,000 miles an hour. And the way I would initially put it with my mind before I learned to step out of the way and quiet my mind to fully receive, I would share it with them and say, well, this makes sense that this spirit is coming forward, had this experience or, was often known for speeding or something, But actually what I realized with the clairs and the communication that we can then have talking back to the spirit world, if we don't initially understand it or it just don't sit right, or we share it and it doesn't make sense, we can go back to that spirit and ask, what is it you mean by this? So say, for example, I've now learned from those experiences, and if it just doesn't make sense, I'll ask the spirit, what is it that you are showing me this for? What does this actually mean? And then I get this feeling or a clear hearing in my mind or whatever it might be that, no, it's not regards to how I was or that I said. My message and why I'm coming through today to talk to my mum who's still here on the earth plane is that I'm aware that at the minute for her, it feels like her life's going 1,000,000 miles per hour. There's so many things that keep coming to her, which is part of where she's showing me all of these hurdles along the road. And what the spirit is coming forward to say, of the mother who's still here on the earth plane is, I love you. I hear you going through a tough time. I'm sorry. I acknowledge that. I'm here for you. Please take a step back and slow down because you're faced with so many things at the moment that if you don't take a moment to pause and step back, these hurdles are possibly chaotic and may cause even more bumps in the road, So in a long story short, those clairs are very relevant when communicating and learning how to communicate because it's what will bridge it. Just as, again, just to wrap this up here, if someone was communicating on the physical plane with sign language, once we are able to then use sign language with them, we can communicate with them and ask what's up. They can guide us if we need to, find directions how to get to Asda, all of those things.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's so nice. And so Talk to us a little bit then about your spirit guides, Stephen, and how you might be guided by spirit itself.
Sure. Perfect. It's lovely. It's very lovely, actually. This makes me feel so sweet inside thinking of it. It's something that I've become very established with in more recent times, say the last year. And I'm sure you've heard often, sometimes our spirit guides may be the ones that we knew here on the earth plane that have now passed over. It may be those who we haven't met, or those who we knew in other lives, or however it might be. It can always be different. But one guide who I'm very aware of, who works with me, is my great nan. Her name is or was Florence, and she passed when I was around 8 years old. Interestingly, around the time when I'd often watch Psychic Sally on the TV and whatnot. I loved her, I adored her, she's very sweet. But when I look back, I was only 8, and I remember very much being very saddened by her passing. But we didn't have very, deep chat, so to speak. There was just always that love and connection. But we didn't talk about anything like this, not in the slightest. I'd go see her with my family, have a hug, spend some time, and see you later. But for some reason, I've always felt very, very close to my nan. She's my great nan, if I didn't say that already. As I've gone to develop and we start to call forward for our guides to get to know them, every time I've done this over the years, the essence of my nan steps forward. It's very clear, it's very prominent, and there's many different things that I actually acknowledge that had gone on in her life and happened in her life that she communicates with me that I now have a lot more clarity on and understanding because of that. So she is one of my guides. I'm aware that there's other ones in spirit. Some of them are my family who had passed over now, who I knew on the earth plane, and other ones who are just, truthfully, I couldn't tell you where they're from. I had to go about it. I could interpret it, but I just know they're close, and they're totally here to support us and, have good intentions of light and healing. And I am aware now, from getting closer and closer to this kind of work, and where my heart really lies within it, is that we have these guides, whether you practice mediumship or not, we all have these guides that do support us, that have good intentions for us, that we can rely on. It's true they can't solve everything. It's true we still got to do our work, and we have hurdles just in this third dimension. However, I'm aware now through this journey and the practice of the calling for help and asking for help, asking that I need guidance, please show me the way, that our guides, loved ones or not, they really do lead us. And I do find strongly that it's my guides who have continued to lead me, to where we are today, to where I'll be next year perhaps. And it's an interesting topic and a loaded conversation. I think you could just have a 3-hour talk about guides alone,
Yeah, and if someone's listening and they want to get in touch with their spirit guide or spirit guides, how can they do that, Stephen?
So I think there's a variety of ways we can go about this. I personally feel that, we don't have to go to a particular school or have a particular status to be able to connect with our guides, right? Just as those who perhaps are followers of a particular religion and hold that close to their heart, they, don't need to go to a particular school or college to connect with their higher powers or guides, right? So I would say, in a very simple way, just sitting down, taking 5 minutes, setting your intentions of love and light and asking for protection and all of those things. And then just asking for them to step forward. My guides in the spirit world of the highest light, I ask you to come forward now, and I ask for full protection. And I'd just like to meet you, whether it's a hello or simply a face that you might see. There are obviously depths to this. So if you want to perhaps progress further and have a deeper connection and a more fluid relation with your guides on a daily basis, then it's a good idea, I'd say, to consider looking at things such as open circles that may be in your local area. And so for those who don't know, a circle is somewhere you'd go for such spiritual development. They're different everywhere you go, and I would say, like anything else, take it all with a pinch of salt, because any group you go to, if it's spiritual or an art group or whatnot, there are all sorts of people who go there. People like me and you and your family and people down the road, and we don't know who we're going to come across, right? So always be mindful. But these are great things you can go out into your community and explore to get a deeper understanding of how you can connect. You might be in a group or a circle with 5 other people, and you sit down for 20 minutes once a week, and you learn more about your guides. And you could learn about the clairs if you were going to go into perhaps develop mediumship or just a spiritual connection, so that you can build a rapport. Just like me and you are having a chat now, and for those who are listening, you can make yourself a cup of tea and sit down and have a chat with your guides, get clarity and insight. And to be honest, I'd recommend it to anyone and everyone, so long as it's practical and safe, depending on that one person's circumstance, in life, to do so. Then it can really make all the difference to our lives, being able to build that connection and have a platform just for our own sake to be able to move through things in life.
And what do you think, Stephen, about our human life? Because it's so full of challenges. And I think a lot of people at this particular time are finding life really hard. Do you think our spirituality, our mediumship unfolds at the same time? Do you think we need our challenges to grow as a medium? How does that sort of sit with you, those thoughts?
Sure. I think in some sense there's truth in all of it, right? Because I think hand in hand, to be able to develop on a spiritual path or as a medium, we need to have other foundations in place, which is where the human experience comes in, with the challenges and things we're all faced with. Sometimes it will be unique to our own lives, but also on a level of like a global thing, like we're all going through now, is really challenging times. There are many lessons to be learned through all of that. Say, for example, with spirit work, right? A lot of it really is based on healing and fine-tuning our communication to be able to get insight and feel supported. And in the same sense, I think all of those things is really what is key and essential to our thriving down here on Earth. Because take the spirituality context out of it, the idea of connecting with the spirit world, the things like communication, support, foundations, encouragement, these are like very key qualities that if we grow up with or we have around us in our adolescence or adult life, at whatever point it may be, is there to support and encourage us. When these challenges come about, like we were just discussing, sometimes it can feel so draining in some sense, very stressful, and not knowing how to manage it. But through those experiences, we figure out a way. Often it will be when we talk or make a plan of action, whether it's as a global thing or independently with those around us.
You know what really strikes me, Stephen, is that you are such an old soul for such a young person. And if I may say to everybody listening,
Sure.
Stephen is 22 years old. That's your age, isn't it?
Yeah.
And just listening to you speak, you could be any age, really. And it makes me think, I didn't start my mediumship until much later in life, although I was always incredibly psychic as a child. I was in my 30s when I had children that my mediumship started to really kick in.
Yeah.
Maybe say a little bit about your feelings around, starting young, starting old, it's always the right time. What do you think?
Yeah, it's really nice thing to discuss. So, yeah, I found it definitely different when I was getting into it, because my friends at the time, the people around me, it just weren't something that was in conversation, right? So it's something that can feel very different or lonely in some sense. In the same regard, like you say, in your own journey, I think it was right you mentioned just after having your children, right, is when it really opened up to you. It was the beginning of that chapter, right? I definitely feel that there is no right way to go about it. I don't think there's a particular time frame that we must begin our journey with mediumship, let's say, whether you are in your 50s or your 20s or wherever it may be, there's always that opening. I think just like anything in life, I was talking to my boyfriend recently, and I was saying about the idea that, let's just say you're in your 40s or your 50s or your 20s. Should you want to be a doctor, there is a route to be able to go and be a doctor. We have the resources out there to start these things. Now, just because you didn't do it when you was younger, doesn't mean you can't do it at a different point, right? I find the same happens with this mediumship work. And I think perhaps also there's some truth in that there is also the right timing for it to onset in someone's life. Because, again, in the same sense, there's things we might have to work through, or just different things that we need to complete first, right? Because it might be a case that actually, for example, yourself, of course, it come on just after having your children, but it might be a case that you raise your child and then 10 years later, when they're in their 30s, all of a sudden it hits and it opens up in you. And it might have just meant that was the pathway, that's what was to be done before other things unfolded and come into place. For myself, I do think sometimes, oh no, like I love this so much, it's so close to my heart. What if I get to my 30s or something and I lose interest, and then the path takes me in a different direction, which, if that's the case, so be it. But I think it's that the truth is whether or not we really, really want something, usually whatever it may be in our lives that we end up holding close to our heart, it usually comes to us in one way or another. And I think that truth will always stand for anyone, no matter what your background is or where you come from,
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And yeah, I totally agree with you. You can start at any time you like. I've actually worked with people who were dying, who just took up mediumship at the very, very end of their life. And they loved it. They've loved it. So it just depends on when you get the calling, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really touching, actually, what you just mentioned there. I mean, to go back into the other worlds, from our way of working, let's say, and to get in touch with that side of mediumship and the spirit world just before you transition over. I mean, I feel like what a beautiful thing, It's that feeling that it's going to be all right, and you can have some kind of perhaps reassurance in one way or another that you're not just going to go back to nothing. And there's another doorway that opens as this one in this paradigm or whatnot actually closes, and then on to the next, right?
Yeah, beautiful, really beautiful. So, Stephen, we're coming to the end of our beautiful conversation together. I could talk to you forever and ever and ever about so many different things. I just love listening to you.
Likewise.
You're very kind. Where are you going next with your mediumship? You're attending your circle. Are you giving private one-to-one readings to people? Can people come and see you on platform? Are you working online? How can people get hold of you and find out what you're up to?
Sure. So I'm doing one-to-ones. I've done one-to-ones for a few years now. And the way spirit works with me will be on the evidential basis. So if we're connecting with your loved ones, it will be bringing evidence through that it is them. They also work in regards to just bringing through guidance, Sometimes we need clear insight and clarity, and that's another form of work that they do and bring through. So it doesn't always have to be one set thing, right? At the moment, with regards to platform work, I do have an understanding that I'll go on to do demonstrations more regularly, although there's nothing fixed with that at the moment. It's more so something that's in the breaking stages, right, of unfolding. I do have a TikTok. It's just a small account at the moment, but for anyone who's interested and would like to check it out, do feel free, and I'll share the name to that in a moment. You can contact me on there also if you was interested in a one-to-one. On the TikTok as well, there's just different things on there, just like with your podcast, and where you get little snippets of information, something you can learn or something you can share with the people in the comments and open a discussion to be able to talk about these things, right? And I find that's really important, just like the work you share. I've learned so much from your podcasts.
Thank you.
So many different things that there is. Like, it's just a never-ending thing, right? And you have a variety of people on from all different backgrounds, and I feel like it's just that thing, you'll never stop learning
and
developing with this work.
Yeah, and there is lots to learn. And your TikTok videos are particularly brilliant because they're short and they're really informative and they're wonderful to watch. So I highly recommend anyone listening does go to TikTok and look those up.
Thank you.
So, Stephen, what is your TikTok username if people want to get hold of you there?
Sure. So on TikTok, my username is spirit_medium_Stephen. My name is spelled Steven. So you'll be able to find all the videos there, and you can contact me direct. Instead, you can also contact me via email, and my email is Mediumship and healingservices@gmail.com. And you can contact me on there should you have any questions or just inquiries about the kind of services that Spirit are able to offer through me. We do things such as healing work, remotely online or in person, the guidance, connecting with your loved ones. There's things in this line of work, and I think you find yourself, it's constantly unfolding. And when you think, oh, now I know, you definitely don't, because something else will come along the way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Your email and your TikTok username are put in the show notes for this episode. So that'll be on my website. So anybody wants to get hold of you, they can go directly there and be led to all things Stephen.
Sure.
For everything that you're offering. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us today and sharing everything that you know. I think for me, it really strikes me something just really strongly that you are such a beautiful, wise soul. And yet you've only walked this earth for a short number of years. When I think about what you've got coming ahead of you in your lifetime, it just seems beautiful, beautiful journey that you're on.
Bless. Thank you, Anne. That's just so lovely. That's really, really lovely. And I do appreciate that. And it's quite touching. I do feel blessed in some sense that I've been able to have this insight and blessing of like so many wonderful people I've come across along the way, even just in this short time of meeting you. I know there's many things that I've learned from it, and it's constantly rapidly unfolding, right? So I do appreciate that. And also thank you to yourself for taking the time. And for anyone who is listening, if you're a new listener or a long-term listener to Ann's podcast, do check out all the other ones that she has. If you feel guided to click on a particular one, then do that. But there are so many different ones that you can learn so many different things from. There's really a lot to offer, and it's such a great platform. So I really recommend that as well. Even if you're just going for a jog or you're sitting down reading a book, whatever it might be, just go and stick one on. And I think you might just like it.
Oh, that's so kind of you. Thank you so much, Stephen. It's been beautiful talking to you. Thank you for joining us.
Likewise. Thank you very much. Take care.
Stephen Smith there, everyone. Please do take a look at his TikTok account, which is growing and growing, and there is a lot of wonderful information that Stephen shares on that platform about mediumship and spirituality. So do check his videos out. They are amazing. There will, of course, be show notes available for this episode, and you can pick up Stephen's email on there and his TikTok URL. Go to anntheato.com, ANNTHEATO.com, and go to the podcast tab. Thank you from me for being amazing listeners as ever and for supporting this podcast in the way that you do. If you have liked what you've heard in this episode or any of the episodes you've listened to so far, please do leave me a written review on either Apple Podcasts or Podchaser, because these help the podcast climb up the podcast charts. If you don't have time to leave a written review, press the stars button. 5 would be nice, but choose whichever stars you want to award to the podcast. But all of that really helps the podcast to move up the podcast charts. I'll be back next week with another fascinating episode for you. My name is Ann Théato, and thank you for listening to Psychic Matters.